All right, welcome back. We will now open up the Q&A session for today's PsychedelX participant presenters. Today we have present with us Rajiv Rangan, Jack Howell, Izzy Bermudez, Justin Serwinski, Megan Portnoy, Philip Boulay, Tyler King, and Eddie Shoup. Unfortunately, T. Vega couldn't make our live Q&A, so if you have any questions for them, please type it out using the Q&A button. Include your email address, and we will send it to them so they can follow up with you.
real so the real barrier to this question of could dimethyltryptamine act as this sort of modification is in the dimethyl part. So if you look at the structure of tryptamine on that amino termini, there are two methyl groups. The transglutaminase 2 enzyme that mediates this transamidation reaction that connects that N termini of a potential psychedelic or an endogenous monoamine to a protein requires there to be a primary amine, so no methylation on that amine. That being said, kind of an open question that I've wondered is whether it's like something like endogenous DMT or an exogenously consumed psychedelic, if it has that kind of methylation chemically, can it become demethylated through the body's typical like pharmacological processes that would then make it into a primary amine metabolite that could be stuck onto a protein, that's kind of a question that still needs to be answered. Um, so yeah, I don't know. There's definitely no evidence. Chemically, it seems like it might be even unlikely, but plausibly through some sort of metabolic pathway, maybe it occurs. It'd be cool to see.
And Dan, can you just repeat that question just for our audience members who will watch the recording of the Q&A?
Yeah, of course. The question was, is there any evidence that endogenously, so internally produced by the body, DMT can stick to proteins? So I guess, MAOI is in addition to like serotoninylation. It's interesting.
All right, my next question here is going to be for Izzy. I apologize. I'm going to preface this with a little bit of background that was submitted. So our attendee says, when considering TBI, there are many physical symptoms associated with TBI, including persistent headache, most common of all TBI symptoms, problems with speech, sensitivity to light and sound, and weakness or numbness, which are not as responsive to physical therapy alone as would be preferred. These are all symptoms associated with primary headache diseases, and psychedelics been shown have shown signal in reducing these symptoms in clinical trials. However, the protocol for treating headache diseases in clinical trials, for example, pulse method, is different from PAT, low doses, but more frequently. So the questions are, do you think that the PAT approach with physical therapy would be sufficient to treat TBI because the PAT will enhance the physical therapy? Follow-up question, do you think a combination of PAT and the pulse protocol used for headache diseases with adjunctive treatments like physical therapy could be more effective?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. And TBI has a lot of complex causes, so it's a really complex, etiology to treat in the first place. And so I absolutely support the thought of like lower dose models. I mean, I was using the PAT model to serve as kind of a proof of concept, but I think in terms of actually treating TBI, I think the important thing that I would like to approach is the incorporation of task and the incorporation of some form of adjunctive therapy, so that these metaplastogens could be used to augment that. So, like, for example, I would love to do like microdoses combined with physical therapy, but also the psychedelics would be beneficial for those headache symptoms and those pain symptoms through their anti-inflammatory effects. So then to slow the progression of the TBI and associated etiologies, and then using that neuroplasticity to actually treat the damage that's been done.
Thank you for sharing that. It was a long question, so thank you.
There's a pretty interesting question for T. Are they here? Oh, um, no. T Vega, are they here? No. Um, there's a good question for Megan Portnoy. So one person said the interdisciplinary part is really key. We need to take all parts of the experience, quote unquote, seriously in science. And then they followed up with thinking about the room as an active participant, which is an interesting word choice here, in a psychedelic assisted therapy setting. What would you like to see implemented in this space? I guess relative to like what's already existing in maybe clinical trial settings or even like ketamine clinics and things like that.
Yeah, I think that taking that ontological approach, the two, I think, most important aspects to consider in designing a space like that are the resonance and the coherence. So, how resonant is the environment? Meaning, how resonant is it to the psychedelic experience? Is it enlivening the experience or is it flattening the experience? Can it be interactive? Because um, a lot of times these substances inspire this kind of through the way it interacts with the nervous system and the heightened senses and things like that. It inspires this desire to interact and play. So, does the environment resonate with that? And then the other one is coherence. So I talked about this a little bit in my talk. In can it respond to whatever internal state is coming up? So right now, spaces are really great at responding to going inward, right? You lay down, you put on the eye shades. It's very good at self-reflective capacities. But is it very good at engaging in play or awe or openness? Is it can it meet somebody who needs grounding? So those sorts of things, and it's hard because I'm trying very hard not to turn into a prescriptive, here's XYZ checklist on how to design these spaces. So this is more thinking conceptually in concept. If you go into this and you look at the room and you consider having been through a psychedelic experience, hopefully in designing this space, can this be resonant and coherent with that type of experience in the nervous system?
That's a really great answer. And I appreciate that you like drew the line between like prescriptive and concepts to draw from.
All right, my next question here. Is going to be for Tyler. So this question is, so your talk was deeply personal and you shared so much vulnerability throughout your talk. I'm curious, like, what do you hope the future of the psychedelic space looks like, especially when thinking about marginalized people coming from marginalized communities? What would you kind of hope to see?
Can you hear me? Cool. Yeah, it's kind of a big question. Uh, I mean, ideally, I'd love the future of this field, especially in the context of like mental health intervention research and psychedelic assisted therapies, um, to be something that we can approach, especially with marginalized communities, um, with a little bit more of a systematic understanding of how identity and trauma exists in the body, but also like how it extends beyond the body. Like actually, I think a lot of these are talks today ended up tackling different facets of this, but yeah, creating a space that acknowledges the power and mediating, moderating impact of identity in a psychedelic assisted therapy space. And we can't really do that until we start actually collecting data and knowing what we're measuring when we're validating outcomes or treatments, assessing outcomes, uh, what things, yeah, are mediating. I'm going to keep saying this, but yeah, mediating or moderating people's experience, which can be a lot of different things. Yeah, so just like in the future, it would be awesome if we could have the data that would allow us to understand traumatized identity, how it shows up in a psychedelic assisted therapy space, be able to tailor music, the the setting to actually be ontologically engaging, um, depending on, well, obviously this is a stretch goal, but like being able to tailor things and experiences that are actually going to queue up and utilize identity to be even more effective, essentially. That would be awesome. Because I think there's so many levers that we can pull internally and externally as far as um, enhancing how effective these treatments can be. That could be from peer support to preparation and integration, how we do those for different communities. Yeah, the set and the setting, all these things like together are essential, which is why this is a tough thing to answer, because we're kind of all working on pieces of this. And yeah, it's been lovely to see all the work that this next generation of brains is bringing into this work. I don't know if I answered the question.
Thank you, Tyler. Yeah, no, it's a big question, and so it's great to like get your perspective as well on it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I share similar sentiments. I think um, it's a broad question, and you gave good specific examples. Um, my next question, our next question is for Justin, and there's two questions that are kind of interrelated. So I'm wondering if you can maybe like find a thread in between these. But in relation to sort of your interest in depth psychology, um, and so the first question is, Justin, how would you ideally set up this study clinically? For example, creating another survey or validated questionnaire like the mystical experience questionnaire, clinical interview, structured interviews, etc. And then the second question is, I think, a little bit of more of a broader version of this question. How do you see, if at all, clinicians potentially assessing archetypal connections for use in the psychedelic assisted therapy process? Do you think archetypes should organically arise or be assessed and integrated into the therapy tools used? So, I guess a couple questions about like the methods of how you'd integrate depth psychology concepts like Jungian archetypes into like existing sort of like clinical settings and research structures.
Sure. Yeah, great question. Being not a clinician, I do want to kind of preface my answer with that. But if I were to go down the route of being involved at that level, I think I I would consider the creation of a newer, or maybe an adaptation of a more qualitative assessment, probably in the realm of surveys, and at least to begin with, and really trying to understand what is happening kind of in that personal psychology during an experience. And I do think, with at least the concepts that I tried to present in my talk, I think there's an emphasis on understanding the language and the concepts that underlie that language. So um, I do think it would be helpful for the people conducting the research to understand, preferably before they do this, but especially after an experience, what actually showed up or what rose kind of to the surface. And that's where I think the language of complexes and archetypal information is relevant. And so I would probably start with the survey. There's not really any quantitative um, assessment, at least that I know of, that can kind of reach that realm, right? So it's a very psychological experience, perhaps as expected. And I think to answer the second question, if I do remember it, I might need you to repeat it. But I think um, with regard to archetypes, a similar kind of answer there. I think this is something that, preferably is understood to a pretty thorough degree, before it is, put into place or enacted within a therapeutic session. And these are things that are probably going to vary based on the individual or the experience as it comes up. So as to whether archetypes should be kind of explored directly, kind of as it like a almost going through them as they are understood, kind of without being prompted. That probably depends. I think there's potential for rich insight to come about through that level of analysis, if you will, but there's also something to be said about letting these things come up and then working with them kind of more naturally, because information and insight is kind of the key here. And like I said, the language associated with that can really help illuminate information that might be felt or known but not understood. But too much information can be overwhelming as well, right? So there's kind of a balance that I think the clinician would ideally strike. And I think that, of course, begins with a knowledge about these sort of concepts. So I hope that answered the question. It's a very abstract thing, especially because it's so personal and psychological. But I do think the research component of that would begin with an emphasis on the qualitative stuff, and then we go from there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Our next question here is for Eddie. Also, side note, the attendee says excellent presentation, by the way. And their question is, have you thought about designing a new protocol to incorporate more qualitative data into PAT research?
Can you hear me? Yeah, I really like this question because I think it is something that needs to be developed. Even though a participant might not show symptom change on the Y box, which is the standard scale that's used to measure OCD symptom severity, even if they don't have changes on that, they might still have a radical internal shift after their dosing session. And that can be really important for symptom change later in life or once the trial period is over. And so even though this radical shift isn't like a quantitative measure, it's still important. I think that if trials would incorporate open-ended interviews for participants, hopefully like later on after the dosing session. For me, the qualitative interview took place about a month after my dosing session, but I hadn't fully processed the experience yet. It was still like unraveling, like I mentioned, and it still continues to unravel to this day. So I think if you are to incorporate a narrative interview, it should be much later after the person has fully processed everything, and however long that might take for that person. They can ask questions like, can you walk us through your experience? Or has anything shifted internally for you? And if any themes arise, then those can be analyzed to identify patterns And hopefully that can be displayed in the research for people to better understand what's happening at the individual level. But I don't have any specific like protocol that I've developed, but I hope someone does that one day. And thank you for your question.
Awesome. Thank you so much. The next question is for Jack. And I guess in relation to some of the heart rate variability and like some of the specifics of your study, because there seemed to be some pretty specific methodology there. One attendee has asked, were there any challenges with the startup or implementation of your study, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So we did have some challenges. So it was just as a quick refresher, it was taking place in a college setting. So one of the biggest challenges specific to the college setting was the fact that the study started at the beginning of the semester when students were relatively low stress and ended during the time of final exams. It was also kind of right at the height of the COVID pandemic. So that made it a little bit difficult to kind of get an accurate measure of what was changing and why. But it was really cool to see that these physiological measures improved and things like the GAD7 improved even with that. Could you remind me of I think there was another part of the question I might have not addressed.
Yeah, it was the challenges with startup or implementation of your study, and then how you overcame them.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to think about that for a moment. Yeah, so we had to think a lot about how to scale it for a college population, for people who may have not had a lot of time um, to really, especially like in person, like with us, sit down and kind of do the different study procedures. That's why we designed it in a way where people had a lot of flexibility in the time that they do the self-compassion training or the time that they do the biofeedback training. And I'm sorry, I think there still might be one more part of the question I might have not addressed.
How you overcame those sort of like challenges. So how you overcame stuff, because you still had some marked effects with physiological changes, and I'm curious to see if you like saw like that stress shift and accumulate with COVID and academic stress and your population itself. But so you mentioned all of these like challenges that you encountered with the college population, a school schedule, COVID. The last part of the question is like how did you overcome these and like manage to like get these results of the study and sort of like close it out?
Yeah, um, that's a good question. Um, for some reason, I don't have a clear answer for that at the moment. But yeah, it was something that we started with a summer pilot study, so uh, we were able to sort of have like a brief run through to see how things might go, see where different hiccups might come up, um, and the scale of the study was. I'm still not sure if this is quite addressing the question, but the scale of the study was a little bit difficult to manage in terms of coordinating all these different students with different schedules, but also um, there was multiple variables with both the physiological data, the questionnaires, um, and some of the questionnaires were like psychometric measures, like the GAD7. There's also, as you saw in my presentation, there's the word cloud. So we had more like qualitative, subjective experience that was shared. So there was a lot to kind of manage and keep track of. But yeah.
Cool. And good answer. Like, yeah, I think you addressed like the limitations and like the challenges you ran into pretty well. So definitely great answer.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jack. And that's like such a great way to kind of work through potential challenges that may come up by running a pilot study. So you can kind of see what potential areas might need more support or even changing how you're like implementing something. So that's really cool to hear. All right, and my last question here is for Phil. We have another comment from the audience. Really excellent work. Thank you for sharing. So we want to share that with you. So the question is, you had shared some future directions of your research. Can you share what are some of the big unknowns or potential implications of your research or the area that you're interested in with your research?
Yeah, it's a good question. Also broad. I'm going to think about that for a second. Some big unknowns, potential implications. I'd say one of the most interesting things to me is just the construct of epistemic trust, and which, just revisiting again what that means, trust and communicated information. It's been proposed to be kind of like a trans therapeutic mechanism of change. And the idea is that in all psychotherapy intervention work, people show up and they engage in social communication, and they either trust the information they're getting from their therapist, maybe they don't. But that's supposed to kind of predict how well someone responds to different treatments. So one question that I have that I'm interested in is the extent to which changes in epistemic trust, mistrust, and credulity, those three factors that I spoke about, sort of the social communication strategies that people use during treatment, how those might differentially relate to treatment response. And so I'll be honest, I am working on that question, and we'll hopefully get something out there to kind of show some of those results.
Thank you so much, yes, for sharing. And I know some of the questions were really broad during Q&A and some were like very specific. So just appreciate everyone here and sharing with us today. In our last couple minutes, I would like to kind of just open the room for each of you. If you would like to share anything else that's like coming up for you today, or you didn't get a chance to share during your presentation, we can kind of go around and do that now. Also, if you have any contact information you would like to share, feel free to do, self-promotion and plug that in the chat, as well as the Q&A. And you can start in any order.
I can start. I just want to say thank you to everybody that's organized this. I completely forgot to put an acknowledgement slide on the end of my presentation. So thank you to everyone that's been involved in this whole process and putting this together for me. It's been incredible and vulnerable, and I've never done anything like this, but I'm just thankful to have people like you guys that are here with me to go through all this. So thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to do the same as well. It was my first conference presentation, so I was super stoked to be a part of this program with IPN and to be working with Victor and with Philip and Megan, both my group mates. And yeah, I'm hoping if anybody missed my talk, just give it a look on YouTube. I know I'm looking a lot at TBI and these quantitative metrics, but I'm also very interested in just overall task engagement, sensory immersion, art, creativity, how all of these kind of play in with attention, working memory, and the effects of psychedelics, but also the effects of meditation, sensory deprivation, otherwise. So my contact information is there. I'm always open to talk to people and just chat about this stuff. So please feel free to reach out.
I'll go next. So I, as folks were talking, came up with a much more succinct way to answer that question. If you're ontologically designing a room, two questions to ask. What is this room inviting, and what can it support? That's pretty much the highest level of it. And I, in my acknowledgement slide, thanked everyone, but thank everyone again. I think it's interesting to see this first day of talks. I'm seeing this kind of theme arising and this, new generation going into the field of a desire to move beyond symptom reduction and beyond what is just narrowly measurable. And I think that that's a very exciting thing.
I agree. I think this type of conference is very important in allowing kind of different voices or different parts of academia, if you will, or even just walks of life to have kind of a say. And I think the beauty of it is in that kind of connective element, right? Kind of being invited to apply psychedelics to something else or apply something else to psychedelics. So that was kind of a refreshing take here. Of course, the hard science is like, it's gonna be very important in kind of leading some charge, especially as it relates to kind of getting these things more acknowledged. But I was kind of taken by the interest, echoing my own, of really like looking at the psychological dimensions of the experience and asking what that means for the personal and the kind of collective structure. So, yeah, I'm grateful to be a part of this year's investigation into that kind of territory. Thank you.
I guess I can go next. Find me anywhere as Rajiv Rangan. I'm on LinkedIn and stuff. If you want a friend. Um, I'll add that everything I talked about today is a side project that runs on a budget of about $0. If you're a rich grant funding institution and want to give me money, please do. If you're in a lab that wants to study transglutaminase 2 mediated transamidation of monoamine psychedelics onto proteins, let me know. That's all I got. But I really liked all the talks today. It's crazy how much diversity we have in topics and people. And I appreciate the probably like 10 people that have managed to stay on for the entire day of talks.
Actually, similar to Megan, I think a more specific answer to where I want to see this field in the future is like I had kind of said in my talk, which was I want us to be able to set especially for mental health research, like I want us to be able to set the tone and set the new frameworks for all of like mental health research, even beyond psychedelics, to be able to actually incorporate the experiences of clinical populations, the diversity of clinical populations that are actually going to be showing up to any approved treatments that this cohort or future generations are able to get approved. And the biggest thing I want to try to avoid is having these gender expansive queer folks, BIPOC folks coming into clinics that are working with their populations for the first time potentially, and potentially even doing further harm or causing further trauma. Yeah, if we want to like rebuild trust in the future with clinically marginalized or traumatized by at the hands of psychology and medical systems populations, like we have to indicate that we are incorporating them into our understanding as clinicians, as people that are be doing this work. And yeah, we have that chance to like kind of set what that's going to look like for other non-psychedelic interventions. But yeah, there's a huge timing component to it, and the future should be, especially the future of just mental health research science, should be trying to incorporate as much new information about identity as we can, and having a better ability to receive and hold space for the archetypes, identities, things people are bringing into the room with them that they may or may not be aware of, um, that are kind of the at the heart of what they're often seeking help for. So that's what I hope for the future.
Yeah, I guess I'll go next. Just want to thank everybody here. I had an amazing time, and yeah, was able to grow as a person as a result of IPN and this conference. And so, thank you to Bianca, Daniel, uh, my talk coach Victor. Again, if you're watching this, I'm sure you are. And then um, I'll just throw this out there too, that one of my passions is to ultimately work with refugees and the Palestinian population at some point. So if anyone has any kind of interest as well in funding research or would like to connect with me to kind of support that, please do. I'm on Instagram, um, introspective immigrant, or you can just type in my name, Philip Boulay. And and yeah, hopefully, obviously right now the situation there requires stabilization in other ways beyond psychotherapy. But if you were inspired by my talk and want to help in any way, please let me know. So
Hi, everyone. I just want to express my gratitude to IPN and everyone I've met through this amazing conference. I felt very inspired hear everyone's ideas today. And, I talked about like the synergy between biofeedback and self-compassion. And I just see so much, potential synergy between all of these ideas that were shared. Uh, I love how interdisciplinary this conference is. And thank you.
Wish I could throw out a little reaction.
Yeah. So like if we can get confetti from the bottom or something coming up, that'd be pretty cool. Um, but yeah, I am so grateful that you guys all have been with us through this process. We're incredibly lucky to have you, and IPN as a larger community uh, is you. And so it's really, really cool to see everyone sort of workshop their ideas and develop them into things that they can take elsewhere, whether it's a research institution or whether it's design or whether it's treating people for specific clinical indications or informing the therapeutic process overall. You guys all have had really, really cool talks today, and we're super, super grateful again that you guys have put so much time and effort and inspiration into sort of workshopping and developing these ideas. So with that, I'm going to close the Q&A and hope you guys get some rest and hearty dinner of some sort and hydrate and all that good stuff. And thank you all. And yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.